Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Streamlining Permit Processing for Electric Vehicle Charging Stations webinar, co-hosted by SANDAG and the Center for Sustainable Energy. This webinar is part of the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project, or CALI-VIP, which is the California Energy Commission's statewide incentive program for EV charging infrastructure. There are different regions implementing the CALI-VIP program. SANDAG and the County Air Pollution Control District partnered with the California Energy Commission to bring this program to the San Diego region as a San Diego County incentive project. Next slide, please. My name is Samaya Elder. I'm a regional planner at the San Diego Association of Governments, and I'll be one of the moderators for today's webinar. I'm joined by Kristen Larson, who is a manager at the Center for Sustainable Energy, and she leads technical assistance for CALI-VIP. We also have a few guest speakers with us today to share a little bit more about the state and county perspectives as related to permit streamlining. They are Aram Shamshian from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, as well as Mo Zarabi and Ricky Williams from the County of San Diego. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. We encourage participants to submit any questions you might have in the chat, and we'll address them at the end of the presentations during our live Q&A session. If you missed any part of this presentation or have questions after the Q&A, please contact calevip@energycenter.org. And lastly, this presentation slide deck, as well as a few other resources, will be sent to all attendees by February 15th. So if you need the contact information or want to look back at any of these slides, you'll be able to do that. Next slide, please. So starting with the agenda for today's webinar discussion, we'll begin with an overview of CALI-VIP and the resources available from SANDAG. And then we'll have Aram go into more detail about the recently enacted AB 970 and how it affects permit streamlining efforts throughout the state. Mo and Ricky will then follow with the presentation about the County of San Diego's approach to permit streamlining and lessons learned before we open it up to questions and our live discussion. Next slide, please. So why EV charging station permit streamlining? Why are we here today? Permit streamlining is a key factor in getting public EV charging infrastructure installed. In fact, SANDAG's 2021 regional plan, which was adopted in December of last year, strongly prioritizes the deployment of public EV charging infrastructure to accelerate the adoption of EVs throughout the region. The state of California has also set ambitious electric vehicle and charging infrastructure goals, which the CALI-VIP program is helping us to achieve by bringing additional funds to the region for charging stations. So local jurisdictions can expect a substantial influx of permit requests for charging stations, which is why it's so important for our region to become permit streamlined. There's a number of additional reasons to support permit streamlining too, such as wanting to save permitting staff time and support infrastructure improvements around the region. We have 3 data points that really support this from CALI-VIP project data. So first, an analysis conducted using that data showed that jurisdictions who are streamlined are completing final inspection on charging infrastructure projects 28 days or almost a month quicker than their non-streamlined counterparts. Second, we at SANDAG have heard from private industry members that they're using the maps and data available from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development to see which areas of the state are streamlined. And they're focusing investments in these areas, and we really want to be able to entice their interests. Lastly, the results of a recent survey sent to applicants of the San Diego County Incentive Project also showed that one of the top reasons for requesting a project timeline extension is due to permitting delays, and we really want to prevent that from happening any longer. In addition, for funding for the charger incentives themselves, SANDAG recognized the need for further technical assistance and has provided several resources to help get our region streamlined, including the EV Expert, which supports CALI-VIP applicants in disadvantaged communities with information about EVs and charging stations. SANDAG is also prioritizing workforce development and has partnered with the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Project, or EVITP, as it will be necessary to support the influx of EVs and infrastructure in the region. And of course, today's webinar is focused on permit streamlining assistance. Kristen and her team at Center for Sustainable Energy will be reaching out after this webinar to offer one-on-one technical assistance to our participants so that we can reach the goals outlined in these presentations. And with that, I'll pass it off to Kristen.
Great, thanks. Great, thank you, Samaya. So I'll go into a bit more detail on CALI-VIP. This is the California Electric vehicle infrastructure project that offers a rebate incentive for the installation of electric vehicle charging stations or chargers. For the San Diego County region, the project is funded by the California Energy Commission, SANDAG, and then the Air Pollution Control District for San Diego County, and it's also administered by the Center for Sustainable Energy. The San Diego County project's goal is to get the region prepared for an increased demand of electric vehicles by installing much needed charging infrastructure. Provides funding for fast chargers or DCFC and level 2 chargers on commercial properties. For fast chargers, there's up to $80,000 available per connector. For level 2, there's up to $6,000 per connector available in San Diego County. This includes funding adders for those properties in disadvantaged communities and low-income communities, as well as multi-unit dwelling properties. Funding has already been released in fall of 2020 in the San Diego County area. That's $21.7 million over a 3-year period that is allocated. And you may have seen an influx of charging station permit applications in about Q1 2021 because commercial charger projects in almost all cases require a permit from the authority having jurisdiction, and Cali VIP requires evidence of permit around the 60-day mark after an application is verified. CSU and SANDAG acknowledge that there is this link between Cali VIP and jurisdiction permitting, and that there is likely a common goal of increasing efficiency of charger applications. Also, as noted here, there is a release of additional level 2 funds, year 2 funding in San Diego County that is being allocated right now, and there'll likely be another influx of charger permit applications coming to permitting staff in the region. This webinar was planned to coincide with that, so it's a great time for jurisdictions to become streamlined if they haven't yet, and for jurisdictions that have already streamlined to get up to speed on charging station permit streamlining policy updates such as AB 970. And then, as Samaya mentioned, following this webinar, there is a one-on-one consultation available with me and other CSE EV expert staff to review jurisdiction permit streamlining barriers and provide resources. So our technical team will be reaching out to permitting staff that have registered for this webinar to schedule the consultation. Additionally, local government staff in San Diego County can reach out for assistance on permit streamlining at any time by using the email on the screen, evexpert@energycenter.org, or by calling the phone number also provided. With that, I'll turn things over to our first presenter, Aram.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here. My name is Aram Shamsian from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Also on the line is Tyson Eckerly, our Deputy Director of GoBiz, and we're excited to have this discussion with you and to be able to get your jurisdictions streamlined. Next slide, please. So as you know, the state has set very ambitious goals for zero emission vehicles by 2035. So all new passenger cars, and not only that, but medium and heavy duty vehicles by 2045, and drayage trucks. So to really be able to meet these demands and to be able to meet this new change, a lot of permitting will be, of course, implemented at your local jurisdiction. So we want to be able to make sure that these permits will go through a streamlined process, and we want to assist jurisdictions and how to get there as well. So we're going to be discussing a few legislations that will assist with us. Next slide, please. So I will be discussing AB 1236 and AB 970, which was recently passed. I will also be highlighting resources that we've developed to help understand these legislations as well. First being our recently updated fact sheet that describes AB 1236 and mentions the new timelines and new parking requirements of AB 970, which we'll discuss. Next slide, please. So we'll go ahead and begin with AB 1236. There's 7 key considerations of this legislation. The first being an ordinance, and all the other pieces are what is to be included in that ordinance. And we'll begin with the checklist. So the checklist will cover both residential and non-residential applicants. This checklist is to be posted online if a jurisdiction has a website, and it will first, once it's posted, it will begin the process of administrative approval. So an applicant will access this checklist, and the ordinance will say that this process will be administratively approved. So it may go through a building department, and it is going to go through a non-discretionary permit. So there will be no public hearing, for example, for this permitting process. It's non-discretionary, it's administratively approved, and based on that approval, it will go on to the next key requirement, which is it's limited to health and safety review. There's no aesthetic review with these permits. It's only limited to health and safety, making sure that the safety is there, and that is what's reviewed upon. And also that electronic signature, which ties back into that checklist, and making sure that it is available online. Electronic signature can be achieved through various means. So Face Smile is one example. If the jurisdiction doesn't have an online permitting process, email is another example. So really having access to this checklist and application online, and being able to send these documents via electronic format is one of the requirements of AB 1236. But of course, if jurisdiction does not have the resource to have a website, that needs to be stated in the ordinance, and stated how they can apply. And also another key piece is no association approval. So associations cannot stop this process, cannot be a part of this permitting process as well. And finally, that one deficiency notice if an application is incomplete. And to my right is the scoring criteria. So this is what you can use to be able to see what these requirements are in detail, to look at the examples, see what's needed for it to be complete when developing this ordinance. And we also have templates available on our website from different jurisdictions, and we've highlighted the best practices as well. Next slide, please. So this is what AB 1236 looks like in a nutshell. There's that ordinance that you begin with, then there's that checklist. In addition to that online application process, it will go through permit submittal. The plan is reviewed only through health and safety. If there's anything missing, it goes through a deficiency notice. It's sent in for resubmittal and goes to approval to build. Next slide, please. And one of the key aspects of AB 970 is codifying new timelines to this process. So it's not necessarily changing that ordinance or checklist you created, but of course, a jurisdiction should be able to showcase that there are these timelines to be able to internally meet these timelines and address those on their website if needed. Next slide, please. These are AB 970 considerations in detail. So we'll begin with the codified timelines and law. So depending on the project size, that will give the timeline for review. So depending, let's say a project is 10 stations, for example, that meets the 1 to 25 station requirement. So that means the jurisdiction has 5 business days to deem an application complete or incomplete. And once that application is complete, 20 days thereafter to issue an approval to build. And same process with projects that are 25, 26 or more stations. So if there's 30 stations, for example, jurisdiction has 10 days to deem the application complete or incomplete, and 40 business days for that approval to build. There's also parking considerations with AB 970. So if a charging station or the support equipment is taking space of parking, the city or county is required to reduce the number of parking spaces for that project. And there's different implementation times. So for larger jurisdictions, this legislation has already gone into effect. For all the other smaller jurisdictions, they have on January 1st of 2023 to implement these new timelines. So we want to be able to help jurisdictions if they've still not met 1236 to set up their process, to set up that ordinance and checklist, because these timelines are going to be working off of that process. Next slide, please. So this is how you can quickly access our GoBiz resources. So Googling GoBiz readiness, the first link you see is the plug-in electric vehicle charging station readiness tab. Go ahead and click there and it'll bring you over to the next page, please. It'll bring you over to this site. So this is where all of our resources are. We have our permitting guidebook, which is going under an update, and we have the 1236 and 970 fact sheet, which we just updated. So you can definitely read upon that, and there are links to the legal text of both legislations as well. We also have our permitting scorecard, we have our best practices, and we recently updated a frequently asked questions page, which you'll see on this page as well when going on this website if you have additional questions. And really being able to check what the streamlining map right here will give you that opportunity to see where your jurisdiction is at. So depending on the color, it will tell you where your adoption process is. Next slide, please. So this is that streamlining map right here. For example, let's say I was West Hollywood. I searched my city. I see that I am in green, meaning that I've already adopted AB 1236. I have my ordinance. I have an online checklist. I have all those other key criteria. But let's say I didn't. Let's say I was in yellow, for example. And if I wanted to see what exactly I am missing, you can click on that little arrow right there and it'll expand that map for you. Next slide, please. So here it is. By clicking on that arrow, it opens everything up. I see here that West Hollywood says yes, they do have an ordinance. Yes, they have a checklist, admin approval, health and safety, e-signature, no association, and that one deficiency notice. They're a perfect example of having all of those requirements. And what a jurisdiction can actually do is look directly at their website and to be able to use this as an example as well. So you can click that link below and they'll give you their checklist. They've combined their checklist and that's an option as well, and it is a best practice. So for that residential and non-residential, if you squint your eyes a little bit, you can see that there are options right there. But of course you can separate those forms too. And you have access to their ordinance. And same thing with jurisdictions within San Diego County. The San Diego County is streamlined. So if your jurisdiction that is still in yellow or maybe in red, you can see the county's checklist as a best practice as well and see how they fulfill those requirements. Next slide, please. So this is basically the call to action. So depending on the color, if you're in green, prepare for AB 970. If you're in yellow, work with us to finish that streamlining or work with your county to finish that streamlining. And of course, red cities as well, leverage the resources on our website to be able to adopt these legislations and streamline your permitting process. Next slide, please. And just wanted to thank everyone again. My name is Aram Shamsian. Feel free to ask me, to email me any questions, and I'm happy to help throughout your permitting process, provide you examples, or ask or answer any questions. But from here, I'm going to pass it over to Mo Zarabi with the County of San Diego.
Thank you so much, Aram, and I really wanted to thank the Cal, EVIP, SANDAG, and CSE team for putting this together. My name is Mo Zarabi. I'm a land use environmental planner with the County of San Diego. We are here today to highlight some of the EV charge station readiness and some of the best practices in implementing these programs. I'm also joined today with my colleague, Ricky Williams, who will be representing the Sustainability Division as well. Next slide, please. We'll briefly go over some of the county's approaches in innovation and streamlining, a brief legislative framework that was discussed earlier. We'll talk about our approach to achieving green in the GoBiz that was discussed, and also share some of the lessons learned and a look ahead. We will also highlight some of the EV roadmaps, long-term goals for the county, as well as the EV regional consumer guide that was recently created. Next slide, please. The county has had a history in supporting renewable energy as a whole, including EV charge station. This history started in 2001 when the board took action to introduce fee waivers, particularly to solar water heaters and solar PV. These initiatives continued on with the support of Excella Citizen Access, we were able to do full plan checks for solar starting in 2013. And we were able to do instant permits for things that did not have plans, such as panel upgrades, where the applicant was able to finish the process online and the permit would be issued instantaneously. The board codified our streamlined processes in 2015, as well as introducing a solar and EV capable reach code for new construction, where conduits had to be placed to support future install of it. The instant permits were expanded to include residential EV charge station, and as noted earlier, having the streamlined online permitting allowed us to actually reduce the fees we charge because it took less staff time to do it. Fees went down from 300 to 117 specific to residential EV charge stations. We also introduced energy storage, added that online, as well as adopting a EV roadmap, a long-term blueprint for the region, as well as a consumer guide. The board expanded the fee waivers to actually include EV charge stations and panel upgrades in 2021. Next slide, please. Fortunately, these types of innovations allowed us to achieve some key highlights here, like NACO and CSAC Innovation Awards. We were able to get a gold status in terms of SolSmart. We also partnered with the state and participated in solar and storage guidebook, as well as the EV guidebook, the CEV. And we participated in the development of Solar App and Solar App Plus, which is nationwide tools. If your jurisdiction doesn't have the ability of having or supporting its own online tool permitting, this is a really strong tool for you. And next, we'll talk about our approach in achieving the green EV permitting status. Next slide, please. Ron did a wonderful job in highlighting those existing legislative frameworks. Basically, we had an ordinance, we had a checklist, and we had online tools. And then this year, we're working on jurisdiction of our size actually implemented it. AB 970 was required as of January. So we were working with our staff to reduce our review times to meet those. Just meeting those two legislative frameworks alone doesn't mean that you'll hit the green status. You'll have to make sure you oblige by the scorecard that was provided earlier. So making sure that you have a checklist for residential and non-residential. It's an administrative process. You are focusing in on health and safety. You accept electronic signatures. You are not subject to third-party association reviews, and one complete deficiency slide. Next slide, please. You can see there is a current map of who's expedited and who's not. And don't feel bad if you're in red or yellow, you still have plenty of opportunity. Essentially, when we first started this venture, we were actually gray, which is undefined, and we had to reach out and actually, through the help of CSE and GOBIS, we were able to meet those criteria scorecards that was mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we already had an ordinance in place. We had a checklist when we had online permitting. But what we had to do is go back to the checklist, which could be updated without board action, and we were able to implement those things to achieve green, including the admin, health and safety review, no association, one complete checklist, and electronic submittal. Right there on the right, you can see where the email intake and that link for our citizen access is. Next slide. So I'll spend some time in going over this. I wish someone would share these lessons learned with me when we first went down this road. But in terms of building codes are updated every 3 years on a triennial basis. But these advancing technologies, particularly for EV charge station, are really rapid. It could be obsolete in as short as 3 months. So this gap introduces some staff and inspection comfort with these new technologies. There's an opportunity for us to overcome those. And then there's also, just because you have this strong online tool, applicants may not be comfortable using it. So you have to do some stakeholder outreach. What we did is we partnered with key manufacturers and industry leads, and we're able to highlight the benefits of actually using the online platform. This opportunity also gave us the ability of introducing new vendor presentation and introducing new products where engineers would talk to our engineers and inspectors would talk to our inspectors, and essentially answering those questions and alleviating the first few challenges I noted earlier. For us, we took the approach of having a single streamlined checklist. This is for all renewable energy projects. Currently, it meets AB 2188 for solar. It meets the requirements mentioned before for EV charge station. We'll be using the same tool for meeting the energy storage legislation that's coming down the pipeline. And the product of that partnership with the industry and manufacturing was actually a pre-approved list of products. It makes our staff much easier, and basically we're doing succession planning because there is this tool that actually captures what was done prior. A quick look ahead, we want to continue to build a regional approach and share some of these tools with other AHJs in our area. And for us, we want to really continue to improve by focusing in on renewable energy and technology champions. Internally, you'll have staff that's passionate about these things, and finding like-minded folks like myself who love renewable energy adoption and trying to nurture that and incubate that growth would be key. And we are also looking at a consultant to come on board and actually help us identify what we can do to change the behavior in making people pull the trigger on adopting these renewable energy products like EV charge stations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ricky Williams, who will be going over some of the broader county goals.
Great, thank you, Mo. The programs that Mo talked about have all helped support the development and implementation of our broader efforts in the county to increase electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. In 2019, the county made an effort to summarize and advance existing work in the EV field with broader goals for both county operations and in the unincorporated area, and to accelerate EVs and infrastructure. This effort is the EV Roadmap, or Electric Vehicle Roadmap, and it was adopted by the Board of Supervisors on October 16th of 2019. The county's EV Roadmap includes strategies to increase EV ownership and use, install charging infrastructure, and identify grant opportunities to support implementation. The EV Roadmap contains 6 goals, each of which are identified with a targeted outcome and 11 recommendations, and collectively, these efforts support vehicle electrification targets set by the state and several county plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, such as the Green Fleet Action Plan and the Climate Action Plan Update. The first 3 goals are generally associated with county operations, such as increasing the number of EVs in the county's fleet, increasing the number of charging stations at county facilities, and increasing the number of employees who own or drive EVs to work. These efforts aid in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from county operations. Goals 4 through 6 focus on increasing the availability of charging infrastructure in the unincorporated area for public use by leveraging county land use authority, permitting processes, and the county's ability to coordinate with regional partners. And these goals aid in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transportation region-wide. In particular, Goal 4 was developed to support and help advance the efforts that Mo has been describing previously. The EV Roadmap identified a number of goals, tracking metrics, and implementation recommendations to support and further existing efforts to streamline permitting for EV chargers, as well as initiate the process to explore code updates to increase the installation of chargers in private developments. Next slide, please. To best advance EV adoption region-wide and to support information sharing and availability for programs and processes like our EV permit streamlining, Goal 5 of the EV Roadmap is focused on providing resources and information for current and potential EV consumers. This effort led to the creation and launch of the county's Electric Vehicle Consumer Guide. And this guide was intended to provide no-cost information, education, and support for EV-related topics for everyone in the region. Our site was launched in July of 2021, and it serves as a consolidated resource for consumer-friendly information on the benefits and costs of EV ownership, the available vehicle and charging purchase incentives, charger options and installation procedures, a fuel cost comparison calculator, and an access to a vehicle search and comparison tool. Further, to identify key initiatives of a website, a key initiative was to expand the amount of information available to residents and communities that are often an afterthought when we're planning for electric vehicles. Information provided on the site includes educational material and resources for those in low-income communities or residents of multifamily developments. And the site utilizes a web design component to ensure that all text and graphics can be translated into the user's language of choice. We're also continually monitoring and updating this site to make sure that the information provided remains up to date and relevant. And we hope that this becomes a go-to resource for residents throughout the San Diego region. Next slide, please. Last, we'd like to thank you for giving us the time to share our efforts at the county to streamline permits and advance electric vehicles and infrastructure. The contact information for myself and Mo are shown on the screen, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or want to follow up on the information we have presented today. Thank you.
Great, thanks Ricky, and thank you to all of our presenters today. We're now going to shift over to the discussion portion of our webinar. And pulling up my slides here, just one moment. So just please go ahead and put your questions into the chat. And then I also wanted to introduce a couple other resources on the call today from San Diego Gas and Electric. We have Joe Belofsky and Robert Iza. They are on the line to answer any questions about permit processing with utility, because a lot of times electric vehicle charging stations need a utility upgrade. And so there's some overlap between the utility and then also jurisdiction permitting. So they're on the call to answer any questions about their process. And yeah, again, just go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat. We have all of our presenters available, plus those SDG&E resources on the line to answer questions. Bring these up here. One moment, please. Okay, it looks like we have one question. This would be for Aram. Are there any additional resources on AB 970 that are planned later this year?
Hi everyone, yes. So we will be updating our guidebook, and that is something that we're going to release. So if you can subscribe to our plugin nozzle, that's the best way to stay in contact with our department on these updates. And as I mentioned on the video, we also updated the frequently asked questions page. So there is also a link to contact us through there. You can email me directly as well, but we're constantly updating our site with this new guidance.
Great. Another question we have, let's see here. What staff are involved at the County of San Diego permit streamlining, and who are the stakeholders at the county level? So I guess that would be a question for Mo and Ricky.
Yeah, this is Mo Zarabi. In terms of the staff, we were able to actually try to consolidate and try to do concurrent reviews. So largely the staff that's reviewing it now are the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical experts who are looking at the actual equipment being used and the wire sizing to make sure that that's appropriate, as well as our structural reviewers who look for accessibility. So we're really focusing in on those two in order to try to really meet the timelines that are specified on AB 970. Jurisdiction of our side, like I mentioned before, it was effective as of January 1st. So we're trying to mandate the 5 to 10 pre-review and then the 20 to 40 days of actual plan check, and we're able to do it consolidatedly. In terms of stakeholders, I can tell you that it's an incredible amount of stakeholders to a varying degree. It's basically, we deal with residential side of it, which could be any homeowner, mom and pop businesses essentially trying to get that on the residential side, all the way up to really large industrial folks. Right now, we're getting some really large retailers that are getting on board and trying to do infrastructure upgrades. So we're working with those folks too. So it's a very large spectrum in terms of the stakeholders that are involved in it.
Okay, great. And another question coming in. So fleets are being faced with new CARB regulations that would require a faster adoption of medium duty and heavy duty trucks. What is the county and partner agencies proposing to help businesses educate themselves about EV infrastructure? The EV expert tool looks to be targeted towards light duty and consumer products. So I think I guess there's two pieces to this. So Mo or Ricky, if you want to answer, what the county is and partner agencies are proposing to help businesses educate themselves about EV infrastructure. Let's just start with that question.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So yeah, our EV consumer guide is primarily intended for residents or light duty car owners or those looking to transition those vehicles. However, we are constantly updating the site based on new regulations as they come in to make sure that it's matching the needs and demands of everyone within our region. So as more requirements come down the pipeline for trucks or heavy duty vehicles, our consumer guide would be updated to reflect that. And then on top of that, our electric vehicle roadmap and kind of subsequent efforts that we'll have that can help update some of the goals and information in that will look to address what we're doing with trucks and heavy duty vehicles.
Great, and then kind of the second piece of this question, the EV expert tool, I can speak to that. So seems to be targeted towards light duty and consumer products. We're also using our EV experts here at CSC to answer any questions about jurisdiction permit streamlining, so we can be a resource on both light duty and medium duty questions in relation to permitting. So we would be able to assist with that. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to our EV expert at energycenter.org email address, and we can get you to the right people.
Hi, this is Jeff Oyos from Sandag. I'd also like to just chime in and say that Sandag is starting a blueprint planning process for medium duty and heavy duty commercial vehicles. So that's buses and trucks. And it's a 2-year project. So we'll have a blueprint that will help identify key actions needed and things that we'll consider, things like permitting for the medium duty and heavy duty sectors. So that there will be more resources available in the coming years. But the Cali VIP EV expert is a great place to start for now.
Great, thanks, Jeff. All right, let's see, other questions. Let's see, so this would be, I think, a good question for Joe and Robert. How do jurisdiction permitting staff work with utility new service requests?
Yes, hello, this is Joe. So I'm going to take that question. And we have a streamlined permitting division here at SDG&E fully dedicated to processing your permits, and they're organized in such a way that they have a representative for each jurisdiction, or they may cover several jurisdictions, but it's a dedicated permitting representative that would work with the jurisdiction on your behalf to obtain the permits for the utility side. Of course, the customer side permitting would be the customer's responsibility. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And also, we do have a slide deck from Joe and Robert that kind of goes into more detail on their process, and that's something that we'll be sending out with the webinar recording following today. So also look for that resource as well. All right, let's see. Let's see if there's other questions here. Let's see, what changes will the County of San Diego be making for permitting streamlining with AB 970 in effect? Has there been any changes between, AB 1236 and 970?
Great question. This is Mo. So in terms of meeting, AB 1236 and 970 were very similar. Essentially, it required you to have the ordinance approved by the board. It required you to have the checklist available online as well as an online tool. In terms of the residential, we already meet those requirements in terms of that current that are required for it. On the non-residential side, we were able to, I mentioned this before, we basically consolidated our review processes to make sure it's only life and safety and essentially reduce that time. We're intaking them in terms of emails, but in the future, we'll be basically processing them online, hopefully one day. But for now, we're actually taking them in online and processing them. So we won't be making any changes necessarily, but we already meet those time review requirements under 970.
Okay, great. Thank you. And let's see, this one would be for Aram. Will there be an update to the GoBiz permitting Olympics, and how should jurisdictions best report progress on permit streamlining?
Yeah, and just to also follow up on the previous question, a clear example is, you don't necessarily need to change an ordinance or documents to reflect. You want to make sure those documents reflect 970. For example, some jurisdictions created their ordinance a few months ago or even a few years ago. They had specific timelines on those pieces, like their checklist, and they just had to go back to if that timeline, like let's say they had 15 days and that didn't meet 970, they just needed to remove those statements on their checklist to ensure that their new material reflects those new timelines. And for this particular question, I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, sure. So is there going to be an update on the GoBiz permitting Olympics, and how should jurisdictions best report progress on permit streamlining?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we're looking into continuing the Olympics or seeing what else we need to do moving forward to make that comply with the new legislations that are changing and how to assist jurisdictions with that. So that is something that if we do, as I mentioned, please connect with us through our plugin nozzle. That's the best way to be notified on these initiatives. And as far as updating, if your jurisdiction is in red or yellow and you've recently updated your website, you have a new ordinance or a new checklist, email me directly and I will change update our state permitting map to reflect those changes. So just, yeah, the short answer is contact me and I'll help with that transition.
Great, thank you. I think we're coming to the end of our questions here. So if anyone else has any other questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. I also wanted to point out that if you want to verbally ask your question, we can also do that. We can unmute you if you would prefer. And also just any comments, if you have any comments about permit streamlining for chargers, general comments or other resources that you want to share with anyone on the call, please feel free to do that. So I'll just give it a moment here to see if there's any other questions that come through. For the county, okay, one more for for the county. Were there any challenges encountered in meeting AB 970 or 1236 that you would like to share? This is to Ricky and Mo.
Hey, Kristen, thank you for that opportunity. Yeah, so essentially on our side, it's the same things that we talked about in on our lessons learned. Just making sure that people on our side, when they're doing the review, there should be a conscious focus on life and safety. So there might be things that are in the code that may not really be defined under that life and safety. So making sure we're steering the staff towards what really makes a difference. And really the addition and updates that were made to 970 sets a really clear guidelines in terms of like the parking impacts, and then basically saying that it's all the equipment that are associated with it. For us, we had a hard time on sites that were already impacted by parking requirements. So essentially having that legislative update, which validates our review, essentially we gives the ability to look at it differently and being able to truly streamline it. Those are like the key lessons learned. And I think I've expressed this before, the way we came to the process that we have now was a really intricate process where we included the stakeholders. So what I want to encourage everyone to do is find out who's actually getting these permits on behalf of Cal EVIP, and essentially work with them directly on trying to improve your processes to try to meet their needs. So we worked it from the bottom up and really listen to those stakeholders and what we can do to help them, and then focused in on our staff about what truly is life and safety. And then that kind of split it into two categories where it was electrical and structural. So we really focused in on those true life and safety components. If that makes any sense at all. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. Both me and Ricky are here as a resource. Hopefully our lessons learned can provide some guidance to you.
Great, awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. So I don't know if any of our presenters want to share any, last thoughts on today's presentation. Like, I guess one big takeaway.
Sure.
For any permitting staff.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank SANDAG and the County of San Diego for their initiatives on sustainability and working directly with us as well, and sharing information and being able to, set up the system where we can be more sustainable and, work on these initiatives together. So thank you to both on that, and each individual jurisdiction for also taking that initiative to look into these legislations, streamlining their process, and continuing to work with us to be able to learn and grow together. So use us as a leverage. Feel free to check out our website, email me directly. I can help you one-on-one. It's amazing that the county has those resources as well to assist you, and yeah, we're always here to help. So feel free to email me in case you need anything, and definitely reach out to local jurisdictions as well, those that are already in green, including the county and maybe a neighboring city, and ask them, what was your process, and what can we do, and use our state map to access their direct checklist and their ordinance to be able to look at those resources. It's a great leverage, and we're happy to help any way we can. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ram. All right. So with that, we can conclude today's webinar. So I just wanted to again say, if you have any other questions that we didn't get to today, or if you need any support, please email evexpert@energycenter.org. Also, our EV expert team at CSC will be reaching out to schedule one-on-one consultations with San Diego County jurisdiction permitting staff in the coming weeks. So look for our email, and then that's it. So thank you all for today. Thank you for attending today, and thanks again to our presenters.